And joining us now in the studio, Brent Bailey, the Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi's Central District. Commissioner, thanks for coming in today, sir.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning to you, Gerard, Mr. Rhino, and, of course, all our good constituents in the Central District.
You got it. Absolutely. All right. So give us a little update. What's going on at the PSC these days?
Well, there's always a lot of things going on, a lot of matters, but certainly a big announcement that we had just recently was the settlement with Entergy. And that's something that's going to continue to carry benefits forward, not just in the near term, but also long term for customers of electric service from Entergy, Mississippi. What that entails is about $300 million in total benefits. $200 million of that is going to go in to immediately offset the rising cost of natural gas to help mitigate the rate impacts that we likely would have seen come January as we true up the fuel costs that have increased across the U.S. and had impacts on almost every facet of life, but particularly in the electricity production sector, where about 80% of our electricity in the state of Mississippi is generated from natural gas. And so we're going to be applying a large chunk of that settlement into mitigating and reducing, or at least, maybe not reducing, but certainly avoiding what would have been probably a significant rate increase in come January to potentially be up to $15 or more per average customer.
Okay.
There's also going to be about a $35 million that's going to be applied in immediate rebates, or if a customer decides to get that in the form of a check of about $80 a person, and we'll hopefully have those available probably in the September time frame as we get ready to move that forward.
So is this going to all Entergy customers or
Yes,
just certain?
Yes,
all
sir.
of them?
Yes, sir.
All right. And it will be issued to them in the form of just credits on their bill,
It could
rebates?
be a credit, or if they choose to receive a check
Okay.
for an amount of approximately $80, it'll be that as well.
And Entergy will notify them and provide them the option?
Yes, sir. There's going to be a notification process. There will be an online portal.
Okay.
The fallback will be credit to your bill unless you choose.
I got it. The default's a credit to your bill unless you say, no, I want to check.
Yeah, and I believe that's the route we're going to go, and we're continuing in conversation with Entergy to perfect and make sure we have that understanding out there. So we talked about that part. And there's also about $65 million in additional savings over the next 4 years due to what they call putting a cap on the rate structure and a cap on the return on equity. That's going to create additional savings and reduced potential increases. So additional savings going forward in that regard.
So what was the squabble about exactly?
Yeah, the settlement. So it put to bed about 13 different legal disputes, challenges, disagreements on certain accounting process and matters, certain operations around profiting of the operation Grand Gulf Nuclear Facility. And these have date back to about 2017. And the Public Service Commission initiated some of these. Some we joined in by our sister regulatory agencies, initiated some actions, and we intervened in those. And just saw as we continue to see these go on, we were certainly very confident in having success. And some of these, others, not so sure, but collectively initiated the conversations with Entergy over the last year. And so we think that there should be a common path forward in resolving these. And through back and forth negotiations, we felt very comfortable settling on this the price point that was made, the settlement amount, as well as the new sort of accounting processes that would be initiated going forward, as well as the cap structure on equity and some other accounting and legal matters as well.
Yeah, we're talking about the company's financial equity, by the way. Yeah.
Right.
So literally on their balance sheet.
And how they earn turns profits on that.
I understand. And that's because they have somewhat of a monopoly. They're a regulated entity, and this is part of the regulatory authority.
It does, and it also gives regulatory certainty going forward for the operational future of Grand Gulf. And, they're located here in Mississippi in the Central District, in the Port Gibson area. They employ a lot of folks, a lot of Mississippians. They have a significant economic impact.
Sure.
And the the reliability of of Grand Gulf has certainly shown its worth in value over the last few years. And we want to continue to make sure that asset is providing cost-effective, affordable, clean generation going forward.
How much of the electricity consumed in Mississippi comes from Grand Gulf? Do we have that data?
Like I said, it's probably 12%.
Okay. Is there any idea about or plans to expand it and to increase the amount produced from nuclear sources? We've talked about that. Rhino and I have a lot on the show here.
There is a lot of conversation about the future of energy generation, what that looks like, and will nuclear play a role?
Yeah.
If we're going to continue to move as a nation toward a more decarbonized energy sector, nuclear is going to have to play a role. Now, to what scale? That's still debated. As we see, we only have one nuclear plant in construction in the U.S. today in Georgia. And they have, unfortunately, exceeded their budget immensely.
Yeah.
And their construction timeline, they're approximately 8 years behind schedule in bringing it online. So we got to find a way to be more efficient in how we construct, budget, and execute these large-scale projects. So a more scaled-down, modular-type nuclear technologies that are being looked at, being evaluated by TVA, by Entergy, and others, is that the way to go? More smaller-scale nuclear facilities that's more dispersed around the country.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it just seems to me like that, and I'm certainly no expert on energy, but it seems to me like it's infinite, it's clean. We're doing a pretty good job of making sure that these things are safe to operate and protect people and the environment, so forth. Seems like it's got to be a bigger part of the overall mix of energy generation.
Yeah, like I said, we got to get how they're designed.
Okay.
And you see a lot of the other countries, they kind of settle on one key design, they go forward. It seems like in the U.S. we tend to customize everything, which, increases cost and extends the timelines for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to review the plans and make sure that they're safe to operate and things like that.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can find some efficiencies in more adaptable, more uniform designs that can be applied quickly and across the country. But another fact, we still have to find a long-term solution for spent nuclear fuel in this nation.
Okay.
Basically, most of our nuclear power plants are also secondary storage areas for the spent fuel. We don't have a consolidated area where they're all brought to be processed, turned into other products, or find some kind of long-term storage and disposal mechanism.
Just a solution to that problem.
That's still something that's lingering out there that we do have to deal with.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So. All right. So to those such as myself who just got the biggest power bill they've ever gotten. So I know I've asked you this before, but I think it's good to talk about this on a regular basis. When is a regulated utility, when are they able to increase prices without authority from the PSC, and when does that require authority?
So there are multiple mechanisms we evaluate throughout the year. Their largest mechanism is called their formula rate plan, which really is kind of like an annual rate case, but on a smaller scale. And we do that normally in the January time frame of every year.
Okay.
Get the information of that, kind of do an interim rate adjustment, and then do a final decision usually in the month of June or July. And we're actually taking that up on Tuesday at our next docket meeting. And that is really where we adjust and take in all their performance factors, their cost increases, cost decreases, just the capital expenditures, other expenses that they've acquired, and factor that all in, see what they need to operate, provide affordable, reliable, resilient electricity, as well as, because they're a for-profit company, allow them to continue to make their profits they need, continue to grow to be successful, and meet, of course, their investor expectations.
Yeah.
But always get back for us to regulate, to represent the people, our voters, our constituents, to ensure that the power, the natural gas, the whatever utility service, water, sewer that they're receiving is the most efficient, affordable, and accessible possible.
Well, I just I didn't think that given the increase that I just experienced on my bill, I think the kilowatt hour charge went up, the rate per kilowatt hour, if I'm not mistaken, and looking at just contrasting
And it may have seen a slight because of the RFP interim adjustments that are allowed to be made for fuel increases and
that's what I was getting to, is that they don't have to go to the Public Service Commission and say, hey, look, we got an input cost here that went up. We got to raise our output cost.
It still has to go through our approval, even like taxation and things like that. They do got to recover the taxes that are imposed to them at state and local level, and we do approve it. But there are certain pass-through costs that they are absolutely 100% able to recover, but we still have to go through the process and authorize it.
You hang around?
Sure.
You got time? We got Brent Bailey. He's the Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi Central District. I want to ask you about hydroelectric power. We have some of that in the state of Mississippi.
We do not.
We don't?
We do not.
Let's talk about that. We had a text yesterday. I want to clarify when we come back. Appreciate that, Rhino. It's Brent Bailey, the Public Service Commissioner for Mississippi's Central District. And there are three, right, Brent? Three, a northern, a central, and a southern.
That is correct.
That coincides with the Highway Commissioner structure as well.
As well as the Supreme Court districts.
Supreme Courts, that's right. That's actually, I think, the basis for it.
Well,
right?
we by statute, adopt the districts provided by the Supreme Court and utilize those.
Makes total sense. All right, so we were just visiting offline about the details and the particulars of how utility companies are able to, or the formula that is used for them to charge customers, which is really based on the formula that I think just governs their overall business model, their overall economic model, right?
That's right. It's called, in our shop, the formula rate plan.
Okay.
And a lot of different utilities utilize that, and it's just a set of various inputs, some fixed costs, some operating cost, expenses, the built-in capital allowances for profits, just a full range and mix of considerations that must be inputted in that. Our public utility staff, which is our separate sister agency that acts to advise, consent, investigate, and conduct analysis for the commission. It takes them months, many times, to go through all the complexities of the accounting process and all the capital, the expenses, and all the other expenditures made by the utilities, and to ensure that rates are fair, that what the actual costs are being paid and passed down to consumers, and that they're getting great value for the rates that they pay.
Is this pretty consistent across the 50 states, this structure?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, most every state has some type of commission, utility board, regulatory board. Yes, sir.
And this
I think there's only 11, maybe 12 that are elected, though.
Okay. That's right. We've talked about
really
that before.
38, 40 states that
just
have appointed the governor or some other appointing mechanism.
All right, so before we went to break, this was in reference to a text I received yesterday. I think, and I can't find the text now. Of course, it scrolled by. I apologize for that. And I think I'm representing this accurately. Rhino, you may have read it as well yesterday, and it concerned TVA. Mm-hmm. And the question, I believe, was from someone in our audience that wanted to know about why their power bill went up, given the fact that TVA mainly generates power from hydroelectric sources. Now, you indicated that doesn't come from the state of Mississippi. We don't have any hydroelectric plants, but it is part of TVA's overall energy production mix.
Yeah, so TVA distributes power to 14 rural electric cooperatives and I believe 14 municipalities in kind of the northeast part of the state. So almost a third of the state.
Okay. Right. I represent that, right? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
And so they deliver power. While we do not generate any hydro-based power in the state of Mississippi, yes, as part of the generation mix that TVA has, I'm sure there's power that's generated in Alabama, in Tennessee, and other places that's part of TVA's service area that comes in the state. But actually, while we're saying that, I pulled up TVA's generation portfolio.
Okay.
Actually, 39% of the power they distribute comes from nuclear.
Okay.
19% from coal, 26% from natural gas, and only 11% from hydropower.
I got you.
So it's only about 1/10 of their generation portfolio.
How much natural gas, you said?
Natural gas, 26%.
Yeah, it's a big chunk, and we know that's up considerably year over year at least.
Yeah, it certainly has. They've seen a significant amount of coal retirements over the last few years. We've seen that all across the U.S., particularly in the Midwest, and we're going to see some before the end of this decade here in Mississippi and their adjacent states as well.
My theory is by the end of the decade, by 2030, we won't be using coal anymore whatsoever to generate electric power.
Only the most efficient and plants will likely be doing that.
That ain't many.
It's not many of them. It's not many. They're older plants. A lot of them have gone through upgrades as far as the heat rate and as well as emission control equipment. We're starting to see some of the impacts of these retirements in certain part of the U.S. and what it means, capacity, availability, and reliability of power, particularly in some of these extreme heat events we've seen, where we're bumping up against the top of our resource, our capacity, a reserve margin, I guess you could say. We always anticipate X amount of generation or demand every day. However, you keep a buffer for those days when you get really extreme heat, and we've been pushing the envelope on that.
Yeah.
And as these retirements continue to happen, while we are bringing a lot of capacity online, the capacity factors are not as high.
Okay.
So a coal plant that would run, a capacity factor of 60 to 90%, and nuclear is generally 90 to 93%.
Okay.
Natural gas is typically lower than that. As we bring a lot of these natural gas, wind, solar, and other resources on, you're getting capacity factors less than 50, 30, maybe 20, 25. Sure. So while you have a large amount of capacity, the ability for them to deliver at the times needed most becomes challenging at
Makes
times.
sense.
And that's where technology such as energy storage is going to play an important role coming down the line.
So when the big utilities such as an Entergy, Brent, when they are looking to expand their capacity, and in doing so that means plant and equipment, what sort of authority do they need, if any, from the PSC?
Oh, everything. They develop the plans, or this is what their recommendations for their resource index going for, their capacity needs, and what type of generation they look at, or they're proposing. We evaluate that. What is the cost of that? What is the resource? What is the impact on resource adequacy going forward?
Okay.
Are we going to rely on that primarily, or we also look toward our neighbors and other generators to help backfill?
And the point I'm trying to make there, really the distinction is that unlike a typical for-profit private company that is not a regulated utility, that is not permitted with and afforded a monopoly, if you will. I don't know any other way to describe it. You guys may have some other term you use for it, but they don't have so much direct competition in a service area. They are sort of assigned a service area.
That's right. They do have certificated areas, and virtually everybody does, even if they're directly regulated through rates, billing, and tariffs or not. Just like our rural electric cooperatives, we do not regulate the rates they charge their customers. We don't regulate how their internal governance and operations are. Sure. But they do have certificated areas. Yeah. And anything that comes on to the grid at large must come through the Public Service Commission for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. As an example, this evening we're having a public hearing in Brandon. East Brandon continues to grow. They need additional power resources. They're straining the existing grid, working with Cooperative Energy and Southern Power to put in new transmission lines and a new substation in East Brandon to continue to facilitate the growth in that part of Rankin County. Now, how much that costs, we don't have any bearing on that, but we must go through the process for providing a hearing, for public input, and informing of what goes on to ensure that that's going to be a valuable asset infrastructure. Sense. Adding to the grid is not creating adverse impacts, but certainly beneficial impacts.
Well, as a consumer, the other issue I would have, commissioners, that they make all these investments and they haven't been properly vetted through the commission, but yet they have this certified area of service, and that causes a rise in their costs. And they say, look, guys, we got to pass this on to the consumers, and you guys are kind of caught in a conundrum there. And so that's the check and balance when you're a regulated utility.
That's right. That's right. To be afforded that monopoly status, the offset is that you must have some type of regulatory body that represents the people and selected by the people to be that watchdog and that evaluator of the validity of the proposals put forth.
Makes sense. We're seeing more people that are investing in solar power or some other form of self-generation, self-power, if you will, in their residence or place of business? What are our rules in Mississippi about if they generate more than they consume, selling that back to the power company and so forth?
Currently, our structure, we have a net metering program that's before the PSC, and interconnection standards as well that to ensure that the tie-in is safely done and protects the line workers and provides that. Anything that flows across the meter and puts back on the grid is credited to the customer at a reduced rate below retail cost.
Okay.
So you really want to use as much as you generate behind the meter. That's where you get the full value of that power.
I got you.
Because anything that you push out across the meter goes down the line, it's discounted value.
Okay. My understanding is in Arkansas, it's at the same.
It is. Arkansas
right?
and Florida is the nearest states that do that 1-to-1 retail credit offset.
We need to do that here. I know that's a legislative thing, is it not? You don't like that?
Stay tuned for Tuesday next week.
Okay, I like it.
And we'll see what happens.
All right, Commissioner Brent Bailey. He's the PSC commissioner for Mississippi Central District. Has been our guest on Middays. We'll step aside.